Welcome back to Product AMA. I'm Lee Garrison. I'm your host for today. And we've taken a little break for the last week, but we're back. And if you didn't catch us yesterday, there was a great session with Rhythm interviewing Avram from WealthSimple about redesigning products, which was really wonderful. And we'll have a recording of that posted up very shortly, if it's not up already. If you're joining us for the first time, this is a product management community event that Mark Silver, Rhythm Razwant, and I have been running since March. And we wanted to help all of us stay connected to the community of product people during the self-isolation. We've now done over 40 sessions with a wide variety of product leaders sharing their knowledge and insights with you. The format's very simple. It's an hour in length. And the first half, basically, I'll sort of lead off with questions for our guest. And then please submit your questions. This is an Ask Me Anything, an AMA, so we're really looking forward to talking about the things that you as participants are interested in. So if you want to ask a question, please do so directly in the chat window in Zoom, and I'll pick some questions as soon as they start to come up. There's also a recording of today posted to YouTube, or will be a recording of today posted to YouTube. And you can access all the previous recordings as well through our LinkedIn page or the Twitter feed. So today our topic is about how to be the product manager of your own career. And joining us to discuss that and to answer your questions is Jay Judkowitz, who's the VP of Product at ClearPath. So Jay, thanks for joining us today and welcome to @Product AMA.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, great to see you. So I like to begin with product leaders by talking a little bit about your journey in product management. And I think that helps the audience to appreciate that, you know, product management sometimes is the accidental profession, right? It's everybody comes from different places. But I know you did a CS degree at Michigan State. Hey, MSU. And you worked as an engineer for several years before, I guess, or when you joined VMware, and then eventually worked your way up to a group PM. So tell us a little bit about what made you interested in product management, and what have been your career goals as you moved up in seniority through the roles you've had at Nimbula and Google and ClearPath.
Sorry, the video cut out for a second and it went really slow, and then I heard the whole question really fast. So what were my career goals through the whole thing?
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what initially got you interested in product management, and then is there sort of a career goal or theme that you've worked with as you've moved up in seniority?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of funny, like you said, product management. I wouldn't say it's accidental, but it's not the kind of thing. And anybody who's been here, you didn't go to college or university for product management. There wasn't a major in product management, and then you got your first PM job at age 22, right? People do all sorts of different things and then decide they want to become PMs. You know, so I've seen great PMs that were consultants, that were salespeople, that were engineers, that tech support. Like I've seen a lot of different paths. My path, I was an IT person originally, and then was a sales engineer and an alliances sales engineer. But it's kind of funny. The reason I really wanted to be a PM is I wanted to make the decisions. Right. As a field sales engineer, I'm out there trying to get people to use the product, and I know why they won't use the product. And I get very frustrated that they're not fixing it the way I want it fixed. And so, of course, being the young, arrogant person who couldn't quite put myself in their shoes, I could make those decisions better than them. Right. And so I had to finagle my way. It took a little bit of time. In the Silicon Valley, sometimes a little credentialism gets in the way. And if you don't have that Stanford MBA, sometimes a little bit harder out there. But I finagled my way into product management. It was a growing company. There were opportunities. And then, of course, I realized how hard the job was and how many decisions I made that were going to upset a lot of people. And a funny story, I actually had a person who became a PM after me apologize to me for judging me silently for the bad decisions I'd made, exactly the way I had silently judged the people who preceded me. So it comes down to really just wanting to make the product better and want to make the customers happier and wanting to make the company more successful. like if you're motivated by that, you get pulled into this PM role because you want to make the decisions, right? And so I think that's kind of how I got there.
Nice.
As for a guiding principle along the way, I think there's, again, it comes back to impact, right? You want to have the best possible impact on the company, and you also want to have the best possible impact on your customers, and depending on how you think, on the broader society. And so my first, going up the ladder isn't for me about ego or empire building. It's really about being able to piece together a larger and larger puzzle, right? If you have a feature, it's good. You can make people happy. If you have a product, you can change strategy and influence outcomes. If you're working with many products, well, now you can guide a whole company, and depending on what company you're in, a whole industry. And so I think that's really the value of going up the chain. Is it's not about the ego. If you're doing it for ego, that's bad. But getting to solve bigger and more complicated problems, I think that's what motivates a lot of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the challenge for sure. And interestingly, I recall, years ago, I read some organizational development theory stuff or academic work, and it was always interesting to understand that, the more senior you are in an organization, theoretically, the more experienced you are, but also you have a different time horizon. So, as CEO, you're really supposed to be looking out, many years at strategy and where the company's going. And as you move in, that focus timeline becomes a little bit more compressed. So, salespeople are focused on the quarter, and maybe product managers are focused on the year or something. But there's that whole spectrum in the organization, and it's interesting to look at it that way. So, yeah, I love that. You get to look farther out and solve more complicated problems. So that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I agree about the further out thing, and it's really funny. Like, you get really worked up about dates as a younger PM, right? But then if you look back on your career, like if you look back at any random product you worked on in the last 10 years and go, if I had launched that 3 months earlier, would the results have been any different? And in very few cases is the answer yes. Now, it's not to say you shouldn't have urgency around dates. You absolutely should. But, I had one engineering VP I worked with. I was agonizing over a decision. Again, it was pretty early in my career. I was having trouble making the decision. And finally, he just stopped me and said, Jay, stop talking. What is the best thing for the product? And it's like, lights went off, and I'm like, yeah, you're right. And yeah, time is one big element, but it's often not the biggest. And you're right. As you get, I think you're right. As you get more and more senior in the role, you do start looking at longer horizons. And
yeah, you have the perspective, and you keep in mind that North Star. What's really important for the product or the company, right? Yeah, that's great. So my next question is around kind of self-awareness, and I've seen a really wide spectrum of self-awareness in the way product professionals manage their careers. Some are obsessively focused on a specific goal, while others are more kind of opportunistic. And before we get into thinking like a product manager about your own career, tell me what you've seen as the most common ways people you've seen manage their careers. Like, how do they approach it?
Well, I've been in Toronto area, Kitchener specifically, for the last 3.5 years. I spent 20 years in Silicon Valley before that, 21 years. The way most people do it is just about money, title, scope of responsibility, positioning themselves for the future. I don't think these are the most inspiring goals, but you literally asked me how do most people do it, and that would be the answer that I would find, at least in Silicon Valley. Maybe things are a little more a little less intense here in terms of the maneuvering and the posturing, but
yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, that's kind of why I asked it, just because I wanted to set a sort of base foundation for, what's the most common, kind of practice, and then how could we improve that? So welcome to App Product AMA. For those of you that are just joining us, we're talking with Jay from ClearPath about being the product manager of your own career. And if you have questions, since this is an Ask Me Anything, an AMA, please post them in the Zoom chat, and we'll get to them as soon as they start coming in. So Jay, when you say manage your career like a product manager, it kind of sounds like you're suggesting that product managers, or their careers at least, are like a product. So tell us a little bit about why is that, and what are the benefits of seeing it that way?
So let's say you're being completely mercenary about your career, and you just want to be a VP, a CEO, and you want millions and millions and millions of dollars of options and all that stuff, right? There's one way to get there, and that's to work in a growing company, right? Now, if you're not so mercenary about it, it's still a whole lot of fun to work in a growing company. And so you have to kind of ask yourself, am I building my career in such a way that's putting me in the position to take advantage of growth where the opportunity is and the learning is? And to do that, it's the same way you try to make a product grow, right? Is you ask yourself, it's like, okay, do I have a model of the world? Like, what does the world look like? What are the world's problems? What are the world's opportunities? What are the risks? What are the assumptions I'm making about what tomorrow is going to look like that may not be true? What are the things that might change that other people aren't seeing that I'm going to bet on that change, right? And what you do is you make this mental model, and you can't prove it because you're trying to predict the future of the economy, of society, of the industry. Like, and there's a million moving pieces. You can't actually be sure you got it right, but you have to make a model, and then you have to have the courage of your convictions, right? And you have to go and say, okay, I'm going to step into this because this is the thing I believe is going to make it. And then you always evaluate, right? You don't put blinders on and go, my way is the right way. You go, wow, okay, a year later, did that work? Did my assumption, is the product growing? Is the company growing? Is it, if not, is it because I timed it wrong? Is it because the things I'm thinking of, might happen next year or the year after, and I should keep investing? Or is it like maybe some other assumption that you missed came in and just sideswiped your entire premise? In which case, just cut bait, right? There's no point putting good time after bad, because in your life, you only have one thing to invest really, which is your time, your heartbeats. Mm-hmm. And so when people say throw good money after bad, that's actually not the real issue. The issue is throwing good time after bad. And so you have to be constantly modeling the world and constantly challenging your own assumptions about the world. And sometimes if you really have a conviction of how the world is going to be, you might go for that job that's less money. You might go for that job that's a lower title. You might go for that job because you believe that this is the thing that's going to take off, whereas maybe something else is looking very good right now, but is really just milking an older trend and ripe for disruption, right? So you really have to look at it in terms of, and again, and that's why I say being a PM about your own career, because if you can't model the world, it's the same skill set. Modeling the business or modeling technology and modeling the world around us, it's the same skill set. It's just a question of whether you're willing to look at these other factors. I moved countries to change jobs, and objectively speaking, took a job that was maybe less immediately advantageous to me. But, I had modeled the world and said, you know what, the better thing for my life and my career is going to be to move, a few thousand kilometers away. And I think that played out fairly well for me, and I'm very, very content with it. But people said, that's really brave. Like, wow, you moved countries, to work in a satellite office instead of the main office. This is when I was at Google. Like, that's really brave of you. And I was like, no, I made a model of the world, and the brave thing would have been sticking in the place that scared me. I went to the place that looked more advantageous, and not immediately advantageous, but where all the trends lined up, right? And not just the trends for myself, but for those of you with families, right? What's good for your partner? What's good for your kids? Where do you want, how and where do you want people to venture out into the world? So,
Nice.
So those are some of the things to think about.
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, I think if I can just sort of play that back to you, I think, one of the key skills or aptitudes that good product people have is that curiosity about what's coming and understanding it, but also recognizing that we can't forecast the future or predict the future, but we can iterate and have hypotheses and test and validate as we're going. And so, yeah, that constant kind of staying in touch with your finger on the pulse of the market or your customers or whatever it is crucial to having that, that worldview
Yeah.
that allows you to then anticipate what might be likely to happen. Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
and I've definitely guessed it right a few times. It's worked out really well, and I've had a couple of colossal failures because I modeled the world badly, and so
So
uh,
that's interesting. So when you look at those failures, what did you learn from that? Like what was there some kind of theme or something that came out or pattern that came out that you thought, oh, okay, maybe I could do this differently?
yeah, there were two really. One is you don't want to work with bad people. There's very, very few really bad people out there. There's people you may disagree with, people you clash with, but there's very few people that are, fundamentally not great, and sometimes and those people, if they're too egotistical, too selfish, and let themselves get in the way of the company and the product, they can alienate the board and they can alienate the customers, and they can alienate the partnerships. And so, like, you can go to a company and it's got all the right founders and it's got all the right money and it's in the hot tech space. But I don't know. People love this meme of, like, the successful jerk, right? Everybody thinks, oh, you got to be Steve Jobs to succeed, right? And it's like, no, most of the people that behave that way just alienate everyone around them and run their companies into the ground. So that's one thing. Don't work with bad people.
Mm.
Second thing is you got to understand the trends, like what's really going to happen. So there are two examples of where I made some pretty bad choices, and one where I made a choice that turned out bad, but I don't regret it all. One of them was broadcasting content over the digital TV spectrum in the year 2000. Now, the company I was working at had access to digital TV spectrum covering more US households than ABC, NBC, and CBS. Full control of 7 megabits per second to almost every home in the United States. I'm like, wow, you got billions of dollars of unobtainable assets. You're only 30 people. We're all going to get filthy rich. I'm going to retire before I'm 30. This is great. Well, it did. Well, there were two things. One, you needed receivers on everybody's computer in order to have content, and you needed content in order to get people to buy receivers. You couldn't do it both at the same time. You had a bootstrapping problem. That was one. Second, this is right before the last mile problem really started getting solved, right? Things went from modems to ISDN to DSL to cable. And suddenly the idea of, like, oh my God, the only way to send Windows updates is through broadcasting, that idea lived for a very short period of time before it was falsified. And so that's one example of, just really not reading the tea leaves well and getting caught up in, like, the hotness of billions of dollars of unobtainable assets and I'm one of 30 people versus, wait a minute, is this last mile problem going to get solved? Should I do a little research into what's happening in the telco space? And I was definitely too inexperienced to think about the bootstrapping problem, but please, people, think about bootstrapping problems.
Okay, that's a good lesson learned. Yeah, for sure. And ironically, or maybe fortunately, as we get older and more experienced, we're able to see, those steps in the due diligence a little better than, when we got swept up in the excitement at a younger age. So hopefully as mentors and leaders, we can instill a little bit more caution in people that are coming up behind us. Yes. So this is great. I mean, now we sort of talked a little bit about the what and the why, as principles of product management. So let's turn to the how. And I think, people on this AMA session are really interested in, okay, how do I start to think about, managing my career like a product manager? What are the specific actions and things I can do and think about? So are there some core principles to this? And can you give us some examples from your experience or others you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll go chronologically through the good decisions. Like I said, there were bad decisions along the way. I don't want to seem like some guru. It just, some worked, some didn't, and you learn. But I graduated university in 1996. I was in a Midwestern school that was not heavily recruited from the tech space. And I managed to, during school, get exposure to a technology called AFS, the Andrew file system. And it turned out Intel, the chip manufacturer, obviously, used that heavily in order to do distributed storage so that they can run batch processing for chip verification and saved them untold millions of dollars in computer hardware. This is back in the time, my first job, I was making $39,000 a year US, and my computer under my desk was $40,000, right? So saving money on compute through storage it turned out to be a really big thing. So anyway.
And some of that at least was a floppy disk, right?
Oh yeah, floppy disk, absolutely. Yeah. But I had job offers in the Midwest, and that would have been comfortable. I would have been close to home. But I was like, the PC revolution was going like this, and I was like, wait a minute, being in Silicon Valley and being in Intel, this is going to be a really big deal, right? And it turned out, yes, people bought a ton of computers. And that worked out really well. I didn't climb up the ladder, but people called it Intel University. It was almost like my grad degree was applied systems in the real world, right? I spent 4 years at Intel, really just soaking up everything I could about distributed systems, which turned out to be good because that was another tech trend that was, of course, going to take over. But then what's interesting is people were buying computers left, right, and center. And their utilization was like 10%, or they're turned off. Like desktops were turned off half the time. Like imagine you're a web developer and you had to try Windows and 15 flavors of Linux, and you had to do, Netscape and IE and whatever, and like different versions of it. You had a different computer for each one of those things. And then if you think about it even further, what happens after those computers are done, right? They get thrown away. You ever see pictures of like Chinese kids picking copper out of circuit boards in landfills in China? Right? I mean, it's horrifying stuff. So, and terribly wasteful. And then, of course, global warming being what it is with power. And so in 2002, I joined VMware. And VMware's mission was actually the counter to Intel's mission. It was sell as few computers as possible, consolidate everything down. And so we kind of caught that wave. And it was actually kind of fortunate for VMware anyway, that the dot-com economy crashed. And so the sales pitch was lay off half of your servers or lay off half of your people. And of course, people wanted to lay off the servers. So I was Intel while sales were climbing, and then at VMware when people were trying to get down however they could. And then I was able to move from VMware, try to get from virtualization to cloud computing, and I was able to get into the cloud computing space and work at Google Cloud. Started there like 2012, I think. So that's just as cloud was starting to take off. And so realizing that people really, really, really didn't want to build data centers anymore. And they just wanted to have somebody else run their data center, have somebody else run their apps was critical. And so at every step of the game, the idea was to try to stay ahead of what's next, right? Hey, internet's big, consolidation is necessary, outsourcing is inevitable. And so I actually managed to get into some of these things pretty early. And that was, some good judgment and some good fortune.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I had a similar experience. Probably one of the most interesting and fulfilling jobs that I was in was when I was at KL Group in Citraka, and we were building the Java tools business. And in fact, we at an early stage, this was right at the beginning of the Java market, and we stepped back and we looked at the kind of evolution of other programming languages, and we could start to see a pattern that was compressing as we moved forward in time. And so we figured, okay, the evolution of Java tools is going to be somewhat similar than C plus or C sharp, but in a compressed amount of time, right? And that actually, so we bet on the fact that, okay, developers are going to start learning with UI components, and then they're going to start looking for performance tooling tools and debuggers and things like that. And we were able to get ahead of that wave, and that, you know, was very successful. But yeah, a little bit of luck, but also some kind of strategic thinking around, okay, where have we seen this before, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and
So,
as I said, the funny thing is, there's very few really new things out there. Like all the technology is new, but isn't it amazing how you keep solving the same problem again? Like you try to solve a problem by building something really big and powerful, and it doesn't work. And you try to solve a distributed systems problem, and then you have to solve a connectivity problem, and then somebody goes and finds a way to make a big thing again, and oh, it's consolidated and simple. But then that doesn't become big enough, and so we keep solving the same problems over and over again. But just at a bigger scale. Like the internet scale today is obviously a lot different, and the mobile scale and the IoT scale are totally orders of magnitude bigger than anything when I was working in IT in 1996. But it's the same pattern repeating over and over. And that's actually why a computer science degree is a great thing, right? You know, learning the theory, it never gets old, right? I literally will still, I mean, one time I was trying to teach my son something in programming, and I wound up modeling it. And when I was done, I realized I'd drawn a state diagram, a finite state automata, which I had in first year university, and I'd forgotten all about. And I'm like, oh my god, it keeps coming back. There, you know, everything old is new again, right?
yeah, but by that point you had internalized it, so it was your thinking, right? So yeah, that's right. That's nice. And you know what? I mean, to be honest, you know, as I sort of have progressed in my career, I appreciate more and more the value of experience in helping me to recognize patterns,
Right.
and that part of my skill, you know, in the profession is pattern recognition, right? Oh, where have we seen this, something similar to this before, and how is it different, and how is it the same, and what can we learn from what happened last time, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's it's very interesting to have that insight. Welcome to at Product AMA if you're just joining us, and we're talking to Jay from ClearPath about managing your career as a product manager. So if you have questions, please get them into the Zoom chat so that we can turn to those and start talking about the things that you're interested in. But Jay, today's job market has a lot of challenges, and especially, you know, over the last couple of months, I think, you know, there's a lot of PMs that are looking for opportunities, as well as talented people that want to get into product management roles. And in fact, you know, one of the things that, because I'm on the board of the TPMA, the Professional Association, and you know, one of the things that we have been talking about for a while is that there's the big problem facing the profession is that there's a demand for experienced product managers, but there's not enough supply. And so as a profession, you know, how do we get, you know, talented people into the profession and get them skilled and experienced so that they can start to add value? So what could you recommend that would help, you know, those, you know, people who are looking for opportunities or want to get into product management, to help them identify the best ones for them and how to approach that?
Let me answer a different question first. I will get to that. But it's interesting that you said, oh, there's this demand, but there's no supply. I have found, since now I've moved around a bit, that a lot of that is geographic. And you know, historically, you know, we try to keep people in the same office and have everybody near the whiteboard with their engineers. But you know, at least half the products I've managed, I've had engineers, you know, thousands of kilometers away, sometimes in time zones away. Like sometimes it's not, it can be rough. But I think COVID is changing everything. So I know your question is for the job seekers, but for the hirers, I don't think the world's going back to normal. Like I think this COVID thing is, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And when it gets over, there's going to be something else. And people are going to realize that remote work is here. And I think PM is one of those jobs you can do remote work. So I kind of just question the premise of that shortage. It's just a question of where you're looking. But But we're really here to talk about, like I said, how are we, how do people get in? And frankly, it is, it's not easy, and everybody's path is different. Like I said, because you don't study PM and then apply for a PM job and start at 22, and largely it involves trying to get to know PMs and trying to talk to PMs and find out what they do and express interest and offer to help. And it's really hard because, you know, you got a day job, you're doing whatever it is you're doing, whether you're a sales engineer like I was, or a coder or whatever. But there's always this opportunity to help. You know, let's say you're a sales engineer. Hey, can I go with you to that trade show? Or if I'm a coder, hey, there's this feature that I noticed that you haven't spec'd out very well because you're busy with a more important feature. Could I be the PM for this feature, like unofficially? I think the biggest thing is to show the interest, right, and show the initiative, because, you know, PM's a lot about initiative, right? And you find people, you got, and not every PM is open to that. Like I said, you got your kind of unfriendly people that will only hire Stanford MBA and not talk to you otherwise. But you find the people who are nice, you find the people who are helpful, and you just do whatever you can to show that thinking, that product thinking, and to take those opportunities to pull out of their head, right? To take those opportunities to ask them about how they would solve these problems, or even just ask them why they made a decision they made, right? And this is something like when I was younger, like I told you, my first time I got in the PM, I was just angry that people were making decisions I didn't like. I didn't really humble myself and sit down in the person's office and go, okay, this is the problem I have selling, and I notice you're making this other decision. Why are you doing that? What are the strategic considerations I'm missing? Right? Just asking those questions shows an interest and a desire, and it's noted. Because PM can be a thankless job. Senior PMs definitely notice who is expressing the interest, and definitely are always thinking about their pipeline and their bench. Mm-hmm. So that would be my advice. Just worm your way in there. And at the risk of getting political, there's always this question about overrepresented and underrepresented groups. And a lot of times folks in underrepresented groups are feel less comfortable reaching out like that because of negative experiences they've gone through in the past. And so it can be really hard. I don't want to trivialize it, make it seem like this is something that everybody can do right away. But I think it is something worth doing. I think it is worth taking that risk. I think it is worth trying. And we're now at a stage of awareness in the industry that we have to get more diverse, that our teams have to match our communities and our user bases. And so, as uncomfortable as it is for you, if you're in one of these groups and you've had negative experiences in the past, I would encourage you to try to take a risk on these managers and senior managers, because they know they have to change. And they're praying you walk into their office, and they're praying you ask for these questions, and they're praying you try to join their team. And so it's yeah. So again, I don't want to understate the difficulty of putting yourself out like that, but I think now is a better time than ever before.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think it's something that, you know, that a lot of us have been sensitive to in the community, is that aspect of diversity, and how can we support and encourage a greater diversity that is representative of our community and our customers and that sort of thing. You know, I think that's critical, and we're, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, you know, 20 years ago, there was no such thing as a women's product manager community, right? Or a meetup or something like that. So it is, you know, you are seeing some gradual changes. But I think, just to go back to, you know, the idea of asking questions and sort of getting involved. You know, one of the things I often sort of refer to is the kind of the fundamental quality of a good product manager is curiosity. And if you want to get into the field, you know, showing that curiosity in some form is kind of your entry card. That's what'll get you into those conversations and those opportunities to get the experience and that sort of
Absolutely.
thing. So yeah, so that's great. Well, thank you for that. So keep the questions coming if you have questions. This isn't Ask Me Anything, so we want to hear from you guys on what you're interested in talking about or finding out from Jay. So let me ask you a sort of interesting question. What kind of career limiting mistakes do product managers make, and how should they handle them if and when they happen? Can you think of some examples maybe?
God, I've made so many.
Yes.
I'll come up with a couple here. I think one, I'll come up with a personal one and come up with a strategy one. The personal one is to neglect to think of the world horizontally and to only think vertically. If you think that your product idea just has to be sold to your boss and your boss's boss and your boss's boss's boss, and they're going to write a big check and you're going to build it and ship it and it's going to be wonderful, not going to happen. It actually happened to me once, and it was the most fun thing ever, but it ruined me because I thought that was how product management worked. It's not, actually, it turns out, and I had a couple failures because of my misguided success. And the thing is, there are a lot of other teams, and you're in a zero-sum game for resources, and particularly tight economy right now. And everybody's got a different, all these groups are graded on different things. So engineering is graded on one thing, finance is graded on another thing, sales is graded on another thing. And it's so easy to go, well, I built this product, everybody get behind me, let's go, we'll go in that direction. But if you're not paying attention to how those other groups are graded and compensated, they're just gonna turn you off. They're just gonna be like, yeah, whatever, and then start doing their email. And it's very hard to win people back after you've done that. And so making sure you really know the audience and know what their problems, aspirations, and motivations are is absolutely critical. And that's across groups. Now, horizontal also works within the product management team. I've been in situations where my product idea would break somebody else's product idea, or where my product idea relied on somebody else building something that I needed, but they didn't want to build that thing. They had other stuff that they had to deal with, or where we were inadvertently competing for resources, or where we were working on adjacent or overlapping or even identical things. And it is amazing how people can be unaware of their situation. And, you ever have that situation where you're like, hey, why is so-and-so being mean to me? Or why is so-and-so, are they going behind my back and trying to tank my project? Are they going to our third level boss and playing political games? And the thing is, you may not believe this, but they're thinking the same thing about you, right? And so to really be able to pull people together horizontally and to really understand how you all fit together and relate to the organization's main goals is absolutely critical. And I guess that's a third thing about, like I said, personal things, is making sure you do understand your company's main goals. There's one product, this still hurts. I didn't do as well as I could have as a product manager in this group because I saw all the innovation and all the amazing things that this product could do. And I just wanted to charge ahead and change the world. But it turned out that that was not the main product that not even Google, but the Google Cloud, it just wasn't a priority for Google Cloud. This thing was there to support everything else. And so it wasn't about making the most amazing thing in the world. Like if I wanted to make the most amazing thing in that space, I should have gone to a startup trying to do that. But where I was, my job was to make the lowest friction, easiest adoption, way to solve a particular problem that would get people buying the things that Google really cared about. And I didn't understand for a long time that I was actually in a support role. And so obviously I didn't do as well as I could have because I didn't understand what my own mission was. So three things personally you could do to screw up. Don't understand the other teams, don't understand the other product managers, don't understand the company mission. And it sounds like, gee, that's kind of obvious. But the thing is, especially if you're in a big company, you can be in a group that's sufficiently large that you feel very clued in, but you're not looking outside the horizons of that. It's easier to fool yourself in that than you think, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think and to some extent the danger is to take it for granted, right? To take it for
yeah.
granted that you think you know what it is, as opposed to constantly kind of validating and reinforcing and checking in with it to see whether it's changing, right?
and so those are the personal side. The biggest blunders I've made product wise are, it's going to sound weird, but thinking too big. Like you like, oh, we're supposed to be strategists. How can we possibly think too big? It is possible to get yourself wrapped up into a grand unified vision of the world that is objectively 10 times better than anything else. And if everybody would just listen, if everyone would just get this idea, like we would be like, everybody's, we'd be better, our partners would be better, our customers would be better. And you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. But it may turn out that that grand unified vision actually isn't just one idea with an incremental path forward that provides value at every step. You might be trying to spin up 5 different things at once that independently are not so attractive unless all used together. And those 5 different things are solving 5 different problems. Maybe God help you, 5 different people like customers who want to use it. And then it goes back to that bootstrapping problem I was talking about before, right? Um, and if you try to come in with this grand unified vision that is not realistic, that doesn't have a path to real market deployment, you wind up, people just kind of write you off, right? They're just kind of like, they may still like you. They may still think you're very smart. They may appreciate the elegance of your picture, but they're like, no, you're a product manager. Your job is to get that out into the world. So how do you get from here to here to here to here in a way that is reasonably predictable or deterministic? And that's a really good way to screw up your product vision, is to think too big without thinking about the incremental.
Well, yeah, and you're absolutely right. It's that delicate balance between a vision, which is more sort of far-reaching and inspiring, but then what's the roadmap to that vision that we can actually implement, right? And we can actually achieve it step by step. And that's the tricky balance. As we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, as you get more senior, you have a longer time horizon. In some ways, product managers need to kind of tread, 1 foot in each, right? Keep that vision as inspiration and yet be very tactical and pragmatic. Yeah, that's neat. We're getting some questions, and I'd love to turn to some of them, just to talk about some of the things that the audience is interested in. So Mukesh is asking, do you have any suggestions for senior people from other functions who are transitioning to product roles in large companies? How do they go about getting that job and deliver on the expectations of the organization?
I've never done that before. I do think that in some ways being senior helps and makes it an easier thing. Like when you get to a certain point in a big company, I don't know, director, VP or whatever, you're expected to be a general purpose leader. And so you can go, you could take, they can take a risk on you and say, okay, well, you were, an engineering director and now we'll make you PM director. And it might work, right? And so I think if you just show interest in it, there's a good chance that there's a path for you, especially if there's an opening. But then the question is, okay, well, let's assume I find people who are willing to take a chance on me. How am I going to make that successful? And I think the biggest thing is to forget your old role as quickly as you can. So the big problem is, because people don't become PMs immediately, they always come from somewhere else. They lean too much on where they came from as a crutch. Like if you were an engineer, maybe as a PM, you try to drive the product and kind of the implementation. And you can't do that because you lose the engineering team. The engineering team hates you. You have to, even if you know better, even if a mistake is being made, as long as it's not a huge one, you gotta let it go. Same with if you're coming from sales and you have this amazing customer empathy and you think you know the customers super well, and you start telling sales what the customer really wants, they're gonna be like, no, I don't care if you used to be in sales, you're a PM now. We see the customer every day. You don't listen to us, right? So you got to forget where you came from and be humble about your background. And then you got to, just start thinking about the product questions. Again, it's like you said, it's the what and the why, and always be centering on that. What am I doing? Why? What are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we? How is this going to impact the company? How is this going to impact the customer? And just keep coming back to those core questions, because it's a weird thing where you're not doing the work, you're guiding the work. And so forgetting your individual skill set and thinking about those, keep grounding yourself on those product questions. And the more and more you start thinking like a PM, and people accept you as a PM.
Yeah, and I would add one more element to that, and that's that one of the things that's a little bit different in, in sort of a senior product role is the responsibility for alignment cross-functionally. That's part of the job, and part of the success is making sure that the different parts of the organization are aligned around making the product successful, right? And so that becomes a key thing that you want to pay attention to and learn how to do well, right?
And I think that's actually one reason why it's a little easier for senior people to move across, is that's what they want from the senior people, is to help align the organizations. So if you have a whole bunch of relationships from another department, and then you come into PM and you're able to leverage those relationships, like you're golden. I said, don't think that you're the old job and don't do their job for them, but do remember who they are. Do remember what they're motivated by, and do use that skill relationship building to align the groups better. And I think that's why you do see a lot of horizontal movement at the director and VP level.
Yeah, that's great. That's it. Yeah, in fact, it leverage the relationships that you have cross-functionally, because they're even more important in that product role. Yeah, exactly. That's cool. So another question here from Nate, who's asking, could you share your perspectives on which background lends itself better to switch to product management mid-career compared to others? So for example, if you have a background in strategy or go-to-market or sales, marketing, service, consulting, et cetera, are there some backgrounds that would lend themselves better to that?
I always pride myself on answering questions very directly. This one's impossible. The answer is all of them. And the thing is, as a PM leader, I don't want one background. I don't want all ex-engineers. I don't want all ex-salespeople. I don't want all ex-UX people. I don't want all ex-tech support people. I don't want all ex-consultants. I want one of everything, and two of everything. Get redundancy. And so every one of those roles that you can think of brings something to the table, and if you put on your blinders, is ignorant to 80% of the job. So wherever you're coming from, hold on to that 20% and try to learn the other 80%. And I think there's probably a statistical distribution that would maybe answer the question. Like maybe you find, okay, more often than not, PMs are ex-engineers. Okay, that's probably true. But again, as a PM leader, just because that's true doesn't mean I only want ex-engineers. I actually want people that maybe aren't as good technically, but have better customer empathy or better organizational skills to complement, and then to have the team learn from each other. So I apologize for refusing to answer your question, but
I think that's wise. It's it is about diversity, not just in cultures and backgrounds and experience, but also in skill sets, right? And that's what makes great teams, is being able to complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, and to have empathy for that, so that you can work together and leverage it, right? And that's, I think, in my humble opinion, that's what makes a great leader, is somebody who can bring that together and make it work. Yeah, that's cool. So another question here about sort of going back to, in fact, interestingly, when we were talking earlier about diversity and encouraging, other, folks to come to sort of work on their confidence and make steps to get into product management. So the question is, if product management is to some extent full of ambiguity, because you're doing a lot of different things, it can be difficult to monitor, if a PM is successful or not. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion, but the question is, how can a product manager build their confidence and measure their own success within this idea of managing your career?
Yeah, so I mean, it comes down to impact, right? There's personal impact and product impact. And this is probably just quoting chapter and verse out of like Google HR stuff, so I apologize. But personal impact. Did you ship the product? Right? I mean, did the PRD that you wrote turn out to a product on the other side? Did the execs buy off on it? Did it get funded? Did it get staffed? Did it get executed? Did it come out on more or less on time? Right? And then there's product impact. Did shipping the product doesn't help. Like Google has this concept of like launches and landings, right? You watch the rockets, right? They take off. That's great, but did they land? And so that's the same thing with products. You can have this personal impact of shipping a product, but then the product doesn't impact the market. So you want the landing too. You want to look at like, okay, well, what were the sales metrics? What were the sales targets you had? What were the customer return on investment you were looking for? What is the customer satisfaction? What is the fundamental change in your customer's work day or home day if you're in a consumer product? It's just, I mean, in a word, it's just all impact, right? Did you ship it, and did it have effect once it shipped? It's in a way, it's kind of comforting, and in other ways, maybe it feels kind of mercenary because it's all metrics driven, right?
Wow.
But at the same time, though, where this falls apart is when you're working on something that takes a long time. It's hard to know if you're having impact on something that takes 2 years to get done. If you're working on something really complicated, and that's probably a longer conversation. But I do realize that just saying impact does fall short.
But interestingly, I think you're right that outcomes are ultimately the measure that we're looking for, right? And that you're right, that helps to build your confidence and all that sort of thing. But in the same sense as we measure, we have KPIs for other things. It's not just about the outcome. It's what are the leading indicators to that outcome, right? And those are the things that you want to be tracking, to identify, are they improving in getting us to our goal, or are they, declining and we need to change some behavior, right? And that's so yeah, I would say for sure, understand what the outcome is and aim towards that, but then think additionally about what are the leading indicators that give you the kind of dials along the journey, right? Yeah, nice. One other question here. Let's just a second. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So we've talked. One of the things we haven't talked much about in sort of your career management is the role of mentorship. And I think one of the challenges for younger product managers is understanding that a mentor can be helpful for them, but even more kind of tactically, how do they find mentors that are, good for them, or approach them or engage with them, without being sort of part of a formal mentorship program?
Yeah.
Have you had experience with that?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I've had many good bosses. I haven't had many good mentors. And I had one who just reached out recently with something really amazing. And it's like, we hadn't talked to each other for a very long time, and he still reached out to me, and was still thinking about me and me, him. And it's kind of remarkable, but I can't think besides that person where I've really had that kind of connection. So it's the point is it's worth its weight in gold, and it can be rare. I think some of the early advice about putting yourself out there is a big step. Like it's scary to go and walk in someone's office and say, hey, can I have a coffee with you? Can I talk to you about product management? Can I talk about this problem that I'm having? I think that's really a rough. It's a hard thing to do, but it's super valuable. I think these community groups, like this conversation we're having now, join community organizations, because sometimes it's less scary to talk to people who are in different companies where there's no stakes, right? If you're talking to just somebody higher than you in the organization and you're afraid of making a fool of yourself, But maybe it's less scary if you're talking to somebody who's outside the company because, what's the worst case scenario? This person doesn't talk to you again. Okay, whatever. It's a big world. The other thing I would say is try to keep connections between companies, right? The people I have had some of the most amazing opportunities come from are people that I worked with in the past. So, it's hard, we all got lives, we got jobs, a lot of us have families, mortgages, house stuff to deal with, but take the time to talk to the people you used to work with, whether they're higher, they're lower, or the same level of the organization as you, because you never know where that, where the opportunities come from and where the relationships can blossom. But the key thing about it is being open. There's a lot of people that are really nice people in this world and want to do mentorship, but it kind of feels arrogant, right? To go up to somebody who's maybe struggling and go, "You look like you're having enough time. Can I be your mentor?" Like, nobody does that, right? So, but they're hoping you're going to ask because they want you to succeed and they don't know how to approach you. So just, indicating the openness for it, and for other senior people on the call, hopefully you can influence your organization to have mentorship programs, because like you said, oh, how do you find mentors if there isn't an explicit program? Well, why shouldn't there be? Like, in any large company, at least, why wouldn't there be a mentorship program everywhere? So if you're in a company and there isn't one and you have a chance to influence that, please do, because people want it.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, I think, we've been running a mentorship program in the TPMA for 10 years now, and it grows every year. And I'm so excited, that it just keeps evolving, with more and more people wanting to participate, and especially mentors that want to give back. But in many cases, you don't have to use the word mentor or mentorship, right? It's just about being curious and asking questions, and then that relationship starts to build, right?
Yeah, it's best when it's organic, actually. It's hard when, you ever have, you have a new hire, and then okay, Jay, you go be the buddy for the new hire. It's so awkward, right? But you're right. If you just ask people things in this relationship organic, you're not going to click with everybody, but you find somebody you click with and nurture it, keep feeding it.
Yeah, that's great. So we just have a couple minutes left, and I have one last question for you that I think is always interesting for people, and that's, as a professional, sort of, with a lot of experience, you could have the attitude that, okay, I pretty much know everything, from my experience, but the fact of the matter is, the profession keeps growing and changing and evolving. So how do you personally kind of keep up on that and keep learning and keep, growing your skills and understanding of the profession? Are there books or people or influences or other places that you kind of keep track of that other people might benefit from?
Gosh, I was afraid you were going to ask this one, because I am a poor role model on this. There's two things I do that keep me from fulfilling this. One is that I get pretty heads down on my work, and I keep focusing on the work, and you keep learning. You do learn that way. But you're learning through hard knocks, you're learning through mistakes, you're learning through new experiences, new products, new customers. And as long as you're open-minded, you will learn. It's not as structured, it's not as formal, and sometimes there's higher stakes, but you're going to keep learning as you do the job. There's no better teacher experience. The second thing that keeps me is I love reading. I have a giant library in my basement. It was when I moved to Canada, a quarter of my weight that we moved was books. Almost none of them are product books or technology books. I actually find that when I have time to read, I want to decompress. I don't want to think about work. I don't want to think about technology. I don't want to think about business. And I think, and I'm not going to go on about everything I read, but I read a lot of different things. And I think a PM is, like you said, is fundamentally curious about the world around them and people and ideas. And I think to some extent, and maybe I've been helped by this, the more broadly I've opened up my mind to things outside, the more I've been able, like you said, noticing patterns and making analogies. Like just reading history as an example. There's things you'll read in history from 1,000 years ago that you find apply to a business problem today. So again, I'm a terrible role model. I don't think, I wouldn't tell advise people to not read PM or business books. I haven't a lot. I mean, everybody loves Jeffrey Moore books. Like, you're never going to waste your time reading a Jeffrey Moore book. Things like, pragmatic marketing, the PM content there, and the adjacent content is all excellent. Take those courses. And otherwise,
But it's important. I think you make a very valid point, which is, at the same time as you want to learn product management stuff and the things around the profession, but it's also important to, keep your mind open and keep learning from other areas, right? That have those unexpected surprises and, helping you to develop skills that are maybe a bit more soft and not so, specific, especially as you move into leadership roles. So, that's great. Well, we're out of time. Jay, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. You're sharing your knowledge and your insights has been really wonderful to talk to you about, and I hope that the audience has appreciated it too. Thanks to all of you for joining us today, and please help us spread the word about Product AMA and share any feedback or future topic ideas by messaging any of the hosts, Mark or Rhythm or myself on LinkedIn. You can find us there. Join us soon for another great lineup at Product AMA. You can follow us on Twitter or LinkedIn for the registration link for upcoming ones. Jay, thank you again so much. Be safe, be healthy. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening and also stay safe and be healthy, and we'll see you again soon. Good night.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.